This time in Basics for Beginners, we are looking at the anatomy of type.
TipTut.
This series was recorded during the coronavirus scare, and due to spacing issues in the house, we'll have no webcam. Sorry about that, but hopefully you can still learn something from this tutorial series. Hello everybody and welcome back to TipTut and Basics for Beginners. Today in typography theory, we are taking a look at the anatomy of type. So we're going to break up this tutorial into two sections, the basic anatomy and then the intricate anatomy. In basic anatomy, we're going to talk about the structure of words, and in intimate anatomy, we're going to talk about the structure of individual glyphs or characters. So how do we break down a typeface? What makes up a typeface? What does it consist of? Well, first of all, whenever you've seen lines of text within a document, they usually have uniform lines that dictate the size of certain parts of each character in the typeface. And I've indicated these lines here. For example, we have first the ascender line. This is the line that indicates the highest point of any character with an ascender. An ascender is a stroke that rises above the mean line. Now, the mean line is what we'll go on to next. But essentially, as you can see, this F here has a section which extends past the top of all of the other shapes, okay? And it ascends past that guidance line. That's why it's called an ascender. The cap height is the line that indicates the highest point of any capital uppercase character, which is like, for example, this uppercase T, yeah? Now, sometimes that is the same height as the ascender line, but not all the time. In fact, I'd probably say not most of the time. Usually there's a distinct line for each, especially on like script fonts. You might have like MA and then the T's go much higher. Yeah, like so. But sometimes they are the same. You might have something like that. Yeah. The mean line and the X height then. So the mean line determines the height of the majority of lowercase letters within a typeface. If there are any varying heights in the lowercase letters, then that is usually based on a lowercase x, and that's where the term X height comes from. So sometimes they're the same. The mean line and the X height are often the same. But if there is some variation, like for example, if you have a flourish on the top of your rounded characters that causes them to rise above like this, but any section of a flat-topped character here would still be reaching that mean line, then your X height would be different to your mean line. But most of the time they are pretty much the same, and it's generally the distance between the baseline, which is this one here, and the mean line is what informs your X height. Baseline then is the invisible line upon which all characters sit. So this orange line here that dictates everything that the characters are sitting on. Yeah. Every single character will rest on it. Some letters with round bottoms protrude slightly in the same way that with round tops, they might protrude slightly above the mean line, but not in any significant manner. If it does, then they are not sitting on the baseline, and that is bad. A descender then is the opposite of an ascender. We have an ascender here on the F, and we have a descender here on the P, as well as the Y in this case. Descender is a guideline for a shape that drops below the baseline, such as like a lowercase g, might have that big loop on the bottom. That's obviously going to be a descender. Okay, now that's it for the basic anatomy of type. Pretty simple. 5 lines, memorize what they are and what they mean, and you can even understand them at a glance, once you know what they are. Now we're going to do an A to Z of the detailed anatomy of type. And some of these do reference each other, like the first one, which is hilarious. So an aperture is a counter which is open at one end. Well, what's a counter? Well, I'm going to just say bear with me, and when we get to C, then you'll understand what a counter is. Sometimes aperture and counter are used interchangeably, but it's basically any shape that is largely contained by the shapes or characters' boundaries, Like in this case with an N, this inside area here is going to be the counter, You might also have one on, say, an R, okay? That's going to be the counter because it's closed, and this is going to be the aperture because it's open. So this is an aperture, and this is an aperture here. Any largely enclosed place within a character. Here is the apex. Point at the top of the character where 2 strokes meet, like on a W. yeah, or on an M. These points would be apexes. An arm, otherwise known as a bar. An arm is any horizontal stroke that is unconnected on one or both ends. Okay, so for example, on a lowercase m, this would not be a bar because it's connected. Whereas on an R, this would be a bar because it's open on one end. Yeah. On a T, this would be a bar because it's open on both ends. An ascender, we've already know this one. Any section of a character that rises past the mean line, and we already know what a mean line is as well. Baseline, we already know that one. The invisible line upon which all characters sit. A bowl, any curved stroke that encloses a character's counter. So here we have a counter or an aperture. Sometimes they are interchangeable. The bowl would be the curved stroke that encloses it. A famous example would obviously be an O. Yeah, we have our section inside, which is the aperture or the counter. And in this case, the entire O would be the bowl. Okay. A counter, we've already done this one. Fully enclosed space within a character, sometimes used interchangeably with aperture. A crossbar is any horizontal stroke at all, regardless of whether it's connected or not, like the bridge on a H. A descender, we know this one, a vertical stroke that extends downwards below the baseline. A diagonal stroke, pretty obvious what this one is, any angled stroke on a character. That could be on an N, this center section, on a Z, like we've got here, or what's another one? Sometimes an E might have an angled diagonal stroke. There's a diphthong, which is one of my favorite words. Two adjacent vowel characters which have been merged to one specific unique character. When spoken, they'd create a unique sound. For example, a lot of people would say this word is pronounced daemon, but it reads and has the same functionality as demon. An ear, a small stroke, unique to the upper bowl of a lowercase g, which I think is just beautiful. You have so many things in typography that are only used on a lowercase g with a loop, which is incredible to me. It's so precise. A finial, which is another great word, is a curved tapered end to a stroke. So like on the lowercase of this C, this is not a finial because it's not tapered, it bulges, yeah? It would have to come to a smaller, thinner point to be considered a finial. What is a glyph? A symbol that represents a readable character within an agreed set of symbols. Now, what does that mean? Basically, it means any shape, any individual item within a typeface, which is why it is arguably interchangeable with character, whereas character is largely agreed to be like an uppercase or a lowercase letter. Yeah. Hairline. The thin strokes on a serif typeface. So you might find, like on this W, for example, every stroke going in one direction will be thick and every stroke going in the other direction will be thin. That will be known as the hairline stroke. A leg. A short descending portion of a character that doesn't extend below the baseline. Like on this lowercase k. Like on this uppercase R. That's a leg. Yeah. A ligature, two or more characters that are merged into one character or glyph. Often used interchangeably with diphthong, but a diphthong is specifically a vowel, yeah, whereas this is two consonants that have been merged together. A link, a short connecting stroke unique to a lowercase g, another lowercase g unique one. Fantastic. It joins the top and bottom bowls on a double story G. The loop, a partially or fully enclosed counter below the baseline on a lowercase double story G. Another unique one to a G. Why is G so important? Who knows? Lowercase, the smaller collection of characters in a typeface. Mean line, we know this one, the line at the top of the X height. Serif, now this is an important one. A small decorative detail at the end of a stroke, sometimes referred to as feet. Yeah, you might call this one an ear, but you probably won't because it's not rounded. These might be the feet because they're on the bottom, they sit on the baseline. Largely, collectively, they're all called serifs. Any small decorative detail. A shoulder is a curved stroke which starts on a stem, which is why those connecting ones on an M weren't arms. Okay, they're shoulders because they're connected. Small caps, we know this one. Uppercase characters which have been reduced in size, usually contained within the X height. Spine, the main curve on an uppercase and lowercase s. Another unique one. I do love unique ones. What is a spur? A spur is a tiny, tiny flourish on a curved stroke, smaller than a serif. So this is a serif, quite clearly a decorative element, but this spur is like a tiny little bulge. You might have a right corner like that. You might have a right corner that has just a little bit of a pokey out bit, and that would be called a spur. A stem is a primary vertical stroke. Simple as that. A stroke is a mark made with a drawing tool to form part of a character. So whenever anybody says, make a stroke, it's attached to a stroke. A diphthong, no, not a diphthong, that's a bad example. A serif is a flourish on the end of a stroke. A stroke is just any mark made with a drawing tool. I like that one. Tail, a descending, largely decorative stroke. So on an R, this would not be a tail. It would be a leg. If we took that R and we went like this, all of this would be the tail. It's a horrible font, but that would all be tail. Yeah. So if it becomes decorative rather than functional, for example, this is functional. It turns this P into an R. Yeah. Still functional. Decorative. Makes sense? Terminal, the end of a stroke that lacks a serif. So this terminal has a finial on the end, which was a small tapered end to a stroke, which is nice. A tittle, my favourite word. A small distinguishing mark or dot often found at the top of a lowercase j or I. Sometimes referred to as a jot, but why anyone would do that when we have the word tittle, I have no idea. Uppercase, we know this one too. A group of characters to begin sentences and proper nouns, also known as capital letters. X height is the height between the main body of a lowercase letter. We know this one too. The height between the base line and the mean line. That is it. There is no Y or Z, which is nice, okay? So technically I should have called that A to X, but they didn't have quite the same ring to it. That is the intricate anatomy of typography. Next time we'll be working with paragraphs. Everything to do with tracking, kerning, leading, line spacing, ragged edges, justifications, all this sort of lovely stuff. Drop caps, they're in there as well. We'll be going through that next time when we are working with paragraphs, which will be the second to last episode in this little series. So make sure you do stick around for that one. I do appreciate you sticking around for these. I like making these videos. Hopefully you can tell I'm excited about them, and hopefully that will make you excited about them too. The last thing there is left to say is thank you very much, everybody, and I'll see you next time for another episode of TipTut.
Remember to subscribe for more tips, tricks, and tutorials. Thanks for watching.